back to another video feature of the Immersive World's Handbook. Today I'm outside of Truckee, California, in the old, as you can see behind me, the old railroad track area here that goes above and through the mountain. And kind of stumbled across this on social media and found it very fascinating to go through. I didn't get to go through all of the expanses of the train track here, but as we come out on the outside, you can get a sense of how unique the space is. And it's an example of, what you might call exploring it, a little bit of archaeology, urban archaeology, in the sense that you're going through a space that was made for one purpose and of course has a much different purpose today. A lot of people going through and hiking. And then I was showing some of the video, amazing graffiti and artistry that's going on inside the tunnel. So let me take you around with my flashlight for a bit of a tour. Okay, and as we get our first glimpse here going inside one of the mini tunnels I'll take you through, you can see just how dramatic this is from an urban archaeological sense. Throughout this video you'll see images like this. I've blown this up for some greater detail of this really incredible graffiti that may remind you of other places in the world, like going to Berlin. And just to show you a sense of where this is, if you're in Northern California near Truckee, traveling along Highway 80, you'll get a sense of exactly where this site is. It's worth Googling, certainly if you're planning on visiting and spending the better part of a day looking through the very interesting summit tunnel and going on a hike. You'll also note right next to the site is the historic Donner Summit Bridge, which is also called the Rainbow Bridge. You'll see an image of it here, I believe, from the 1930s, and certainly on its own is a pretty amazing architectural and engineering feat. There's a lot of history in this area, and I think that's one of the things for me that makes this summit tunnel so interesting to look at. We also, of course, think of the idea of reclamation and remaking, the fact that the original purpose of the site has changed and now it's taken on this new sensibility. And one of the things I'll be talking about in this video today is the idea of mana, which I think traditionally has been thought about in indigenous and so-called traditional societies in terms of magic and so forth and the power of place. I want to shift the discussion just a bit for today's consideration. As I mentioned, in terms of the history, it's worth going to the Donner Summit Museum, the Memorial Museum, which of course gets into the history of the Donner Party, and that's certainly something you should check out if you have the opportunity to visit this area. And with this history in mind, certainly we could note that one of the things I think that establishes this site as a remarkable site, not just in terms of its reuse, as we'll be talking about, but is the fact of its history in terms of this remarkable engineering effort. I'm not going to talk that much in this video about the history of the railroad through this area, nor say the significance in terms of this site's location very near the Lincoln Highway, the U.S.'s first transcontinental highway. But there is a lot of great historical information online that you can note, and also, as I said, at the Donner Memorial Museum. This tunnel itself was completed in 1867, and the first train passed through the next year. And so you get a sense of this history and how remarkable it is from an engineering standpoint as you begin to walk through the tunnel. As you can see here, you have to certainly bring your flashlight. There are some areas you'll see later that have sunlight coming through, either intentionally or because of some degradation of the site over time. This actual site closed in 1993 and the route was changed to a new location. If you look at some historic photos online, you can see the interesting train tracks, the fact that they were passing through this tunnel, of course, and those are now gone. So you do have a sense as you go through this site of the remarkable history of the railroad as it once passed through this location. And for me, one of the significant things about these aspects of reuse and remaking I'll be talking about in this video is this sense of being able to parallel and compare and contrast the old and the new. So as we're going throughout this site, we can appreciate the fact that there's something very historic here, and there's something new as well in terms of, as we'll be looking at the graffiti and the reuse at the site. Now, an interesting thing occurred to me as you see these motorcycles going through one of the tunnels. An interesting thing occurred to me on my day visiting the Summit Tunnel and taking this short hike through it. Not only did we see motorcycles passing through, but you'll see here in just a second, there was this light coming down the tunnel and a pretty loud noise, which I determined later was the noise of tiny propellers on top of a drone. And of course, one of the things in the contemporary world that maybe we understand is that more and more we use technologies to document our lives. So I'm here this day using my GoPro, which provides the dramatic wide-angle image that and video that is noted with the GoPro cameras near 180 degrees. But I was in a sense one-upped by the drone here, which I don't own a drone, but it was kind of an uncanny thing to hear this sound and not really knowing what was coming. And we determined, as you'll see here in a second, that it was indeed a crew that was shooting a video for some film of some sort. I didn't get a chance to ask them exactly what it was. And you can see then as the drone landed here, we were quite curious at what exactly that they were doing here in the tunnel with the rest of us on that day. Okay, and as we leave the drone behind, we can get back into some of the footage here of the dramatic art on the walls. And this reminds me of the concept of mana, which I've mentioned at the beginning of this video. So mana comes from specific Polynesian cultures, and it's a hard word and concept to translate, but we can think about things like prestige, power, respect, energy, and there's actually a fairly remarkable video documentary called Mana, which gets into the whole nature of this concept. But we can imagine a person, a place, an object, whether it's an object of nature or something inorganic that's non-living. Basically, this place, person, or object or entity is charged with energy. And the charging of this energy, of course, can happen through a variety of different means. So for me, when I look at the Donner Summit Tunnel, I think of the fact that the re-inhabitation, the remaking, the reclaiming of the space, and the dramatic nature of the art that is on the walls lends this place that sense of mana, this power, energy, or charge. Of course, this is an entirely personal thing. For some people, an immersive space like a cathedral could be a site of such mana. For other people, ironically enough, it could be a consumer space, a shopping mall, a theme park like Disneyland. And for me, a space like this has this energy because of the fact that so many people have come through it, and they have essentially placed their own signature on the walls. Not everyone chooses, of course, to do graffiti or to do art on the walls, but for those that have, you get this sense, as I mentioned earlier, of this polyvocality that's going on, a conversation between different people. And not that every individual who stepped foot in this space and exhibited some form of art on the wall necessarily had a clear message, but some certainly did. Others, by the mere fact of marking it, lend something to the space. We can think of other famous spaces where there's inhabitation and history of personal identity of individuals who've passed through that space. And I'm thinking of the Bubblegum Wall in Seattle, Washington. You could also think about famous sites around the world. Certainly Europe has many where lovers will place locks on bridges, on rails, and so forth. That fact of the people lending the space itself a sense of credibility by showing that it's been lived in, it's been used, it's been reused in this case, I think says something to me quite remarkable about a space like this. And for me, it gives it that sense of charge, energy, or mana that I'm talking about in this video. And as I've stated, one of the reasons that I feel that there's an energy here is the fact that the space is being reused, remade, reclaimed. Again, totally different purpose today, no longer a railway. Hopefully we can appreciate the history, that contrast of the old and the new that is such a part of remaking. And in fact, if you look up the etymology of remaking, you see that there's both a conservative and a very avant-garde tendency to the prefix re, in that it's pointing us backwards in time. So here we recall this used to be a railway station. Hopefully you remember all the people who labored here so hard to create this for purposes of transportation. And then we're also recalling then the new as we look at some of the art here. The space has been retold or is being retold here in the present as individuals have placed their own stamp of identity on this particular site that has reminders of the past and now the new. And if you end up doing this hike yourself, I think you might agree that it's unique because of the fact of the reclaiming of the space by people. There's a randomness to it, of course, and you can think about any space that is reused. There's an opportunity for a polyvocality, a multiplicity of voices to come into play. So there isn't, in a sense, planning that goes on here. And if you visit Berlin, like you will see in Berlin with the graffiti there and the street art, you will note a difference in terms of the styles, the levels of talent, and so forth. As you walk out of here, one of the many entrances and exits to the tunnels, you can see just how dramatic this landscape is given the contrast of the nature on the outside and culture on the inside. Okay, and then for the remainder of the video, I'll take you back through and show you some of the sites inside the tunnels. If you haven't had the opportunity to visit, this could be certainly giving you some insights about what you might see. Again, if you do go, you can explore on your own. But so let me feature some of the video here and play you some background music. If you wish, you can certainly fast forward to the end of the video, but I wanted to include some of my GoPro video because I think it does give you a sense of why this space is so unique, not just for Northern California, but really I would say for any part of the world. So let's take a look then at some of the footage. I hope you enjoyed the video feature today here in this interesting part of Truckee, California, and please come back for additional video features of the Immersive World's Handbook.